How did they develop the new type of aviation in America and why was it so important? The Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, were the first people to invent a new type of aviation. They created the first airplane in 1903, which was called Flyer. The Flyer was able to fly for about 120 feet. This invention led to the creation of many other types of airplanes in America. The new type of aviation that developed in America was important because it made air travel much more accessible and affordable. It also helped create jobs that would not have existed otherwise, like air traffic controllers and airline pilots. They grew up with a passion for aviation and made the first powered flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in 1903. They continued to make improvements to the airplane over time and developed new types of airplanes. Like the Wright Flyer 3, which was involved in a fatal accident when Orville Wright crashed in 1912. Orville and Wilbur Wright were born on December 1871 and 1867, respectively. They had a very close relationship, with the older brother looking after the younger one. The Wrights wanted to learn to fly in order to build an airplane that could assist people who experience poor weather conditions. In 1899, they built a kite that worked well. The next year, they built their first airplane, and in 1903, they completed the Wright Flyer 2, which had 4 propellers. In 1908 and 1909, they built the Wright Flyer 3, which weighed 10 tons and could fly as high as an estimated 65 feet. In 1912, Orville Wright crashed into a house due to insufficient wind speed, and in 1914, the Wright brothers completed their first plane, which was the Kitty Hawk. The following year, they flew for 27 minutes. In 1926, Orville Wright died, and in 1936, Wilbur Wright passed away. What were some important consequences of the innovation of aircraft in America? The innovation of aircraft in America had a lot of consequences, some good and some bad. For example, the invention led to the rise of air travel, which brought people closer together and helped them grow their economy. However, it also led to the destruction of the environment. Some important consequences of the innovation were: 1. The first transcontinental flight was made in 1903, and that brought people closer together. 2. The invention led to a new way for Americans to travel, which is now known as the Great Migration, where millions of African Americans moved from rural areas into cities such as Chicago, Detroit, New York City, etc. 3. The invention also caused environmental problems such as air pollution and noise pollution. 4. However, the invention allowed for greater access to various forms of media. Keep flying forever with these 4 inspiring stories. This video covers 4 inspiring stories of people who have faced challenges and yet managed to keep flying. 1. Amelia Earhart. In 1922, she became the first person to fly solo and nonstop from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, to Clifton, Ireland in a JN4 airplane. In 1932, she set a new distance record when she flew between Los Angeles and Newark in 12 hours and 56 minutes. Amelia Earhart was born on July 24, 1897 in Atchison, Kansas. They had 2 sons before George died in 1940. She started flying after World War I and became a leading advocate for air travel. She helped found the Council of Women Pilots and served as its president in 1928-29. Amelia went to Purdue University to study chemistry and joined the Alpha Delta Pi sorority during her sophomore year, but dropped out after marrying George Putnam on June 7, 1919. Amelia's first flight was in May of 1921, and she earned her license 2 weeks later. In 1924, Amelia and Putnam moved to California, where he put her name in the running for an airmail contract. Putnam died in a plane crash during that attempt, but Amelia continued to fly for Pan American Airways as a passenger until 1931. Amelia's flights attracted thousands of people, and she became the first woman to receive a ticker tape parade in New York City when she returned from her record-breaking flight around the world. Amelia died on March 1, 1932, while flying with her third husband, Air Corps Lieutenant Colonel John H. Jack Lord Jr., near Mount Dora, Florida. 2. Steve Fawcett. In the 1990s, Steve Fawcett became the first person to fly an airplane solo around the world. He accomplished this feat in just under 3 days, with a total flight time of 45 hours and 45 minutes. This was possible because Fawcett had a strategy for using jet fuel efficiently. Thomas Schultz, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives and congressman from Pennsylvania, flew on October 1, 1935 on the first transatlantic flight by land or by air from New York to Paris in less than 24 hours. He was accompanied by fellow U.S. Congressman Wilbur Wright and Louis Blériot, and also by 3 reporters. Fawcett's strategy fueling approach allowed him to take off from a runway, which allowed his plane to leave the ground quickly. Fawcett had been testing this strategy on smaller planes for years and believed that it would work well with his aircraft. On September 1, 1979, Fawcett set out for the first time on a solo circumnavigation of the globe. He had not planned to use a fuel-efficient strategy and was carrying more than he had planned to in case of emergencies. The next day, he flew again from Honolulu to Japan and back to California. He then flew nonstop from Honolulu to Japan and then back to California, where he landed on September 12, 1979. Fawcett flew nonstop from New York City to Honolulu, Hawaii and then back to California in a circumnavigation in aviation on September 1, 1979. He took off from New York City on September 1, 1979 and landed in Hawaii on the 9th of September. The following day he left for the last time as a human and flew to California. 3. John Glenn. John Glenn was a decorated American astronaut and the first American to orbit the Earth. He fought in World War II, Korea and Vietnam, before becoming an astronaut at NASA. Glenn was the only person to have flown in all 3 branches of the U.S. military and was also a member of NASA's astronaut class of 1959. Glenn was one of the original 7 astronauts in NASA's Project Mercury. He became an orbital test pilot and flew the first Glenn mission in February 1962, making 3 orbits of Earth over 4 hours. In 1962, he flew a modified F-104 starfighter aircraft around the world under what is called a round-the-world flight, meaning that he completed a full circuit of the globe without stopping. John Glenn, Sr., was born on October 18, 1921 in Cambridge, Ohio to John Stewart Glenn and Catherine Coleman. His father was an engineer who supervised railway construction in Ohio before becoming president of Montgomery Ward. Glenn is known as the last man to walk on the moon. Before becoming president of Montgomery Ward, Glenn is known as the last man to walk on the moon. He served as a United States Senator from Ohio from 1974 to 1999, but died in 2016 at age 95. 4. The Wright brothers. The Wright brothers are one of the most inspiring entrepreneurial stories in modern history. After learning to fly with kites, they decided to build their own plane and succeeded. Orville and Wilbur Wright made up their minds to build a powered, heavier-than-air airplane. They built and flew the world's first successful self-propelled seagoing aircraft on December 17, 1903. The Wright brothers were 2 of the most inspirational entrepreneurial stories in modern history. After learning to fly with kites, they decided to build their own airplane. However, they did not have the money to pay for a proper plane. Instead, they started with a bicycle and built an engine out of parts from scrap engines. They also did not have much experience in building planes, so they had to figure out how to build their own plane from scratch, which included structuring the wings, designing propellers and other mechanical parts. Thank you for watching The Secrets of the First Controlled Heavier-Than-Air Flight of the Wright Brothers, and don't forget to subscribe, please.